Hello students, today I am going to explain to you a poem, A Photograph, written by Shirley Toulson. In this poem, the poetess Shirley Toulson is remembering her mother who is no more, and she is looking at a photograph which is showing the picture of her mother spending her holiday on the beach, and she is just 12 at the moment, and her she is accompanied by two of her girl cousins. Let's see. The cardboard shows me how it was when the two girl cousins went paddling. The cardboard, here cardboard doesn't mean just a cardboard, it means a photograph pasted on the cardboard. Here cardboard is also indicating about the mortal nature of human being, as just like a cardboard is temporary, same way human life is also a very short lived on this earth. The cardboard shows me how it was means how it was the scene was when the two girl cousins went paddling. Paddling here means not using paddles, but it here means moving our hands and legs up and down in the water. So it means splashing water. The two girl cousins went for paddling or for swimming in the sea, each one where they were holding one of my mother's hands. Each of both the girl cousins were holding her mother's hands. Her mother was in the center, and the two girl cousins were on her sides. And she, the big girl, and see the she refers to her mother. She was the bigger one, she was the eldest of them, and she was about 12 years or so. At that moment, her mother was just 12 years or so. All three stood still to smile through their hair. All the three girls who were there on the beach were smiling through their. It means that the girls' hair were being blown by the air, that breeze that was blowing. So they were smiling, and through their hair uh, they were uh, smiling as they were getting clicked, at their picture was getting clicked. Why they were smiling? At the uncle with the camera. They were smiling towards their uncle who was clicking their photograph. A sweet face. The poetess is talking about her face of her mother. She says that the picture, as she's watching and looking at her mother's photograph, she sees that the face of her mother was very sweet, as she was just 12 in her teens, and she was such a beautiful and sweet girl, as she was full of innocence. That was before I was born. This was my mother's face before I was born. And the sea, which appears to have changed less, washed their terribly transient feet. And she now uh, realizes the striking difference between her mother and a mother's feet and the sea which is visible in the picture. The sea is looking as if the sea remains unchanged, because the natural objects don't change, while the mother's terribly transient feet, which were being washed by the water of the sea, they were terribly transient. Terribly means badly transient, very temporary. As you know that human life on the earth is very temporary, it's short lived, while the sea or the objects of nature are permanent. There is no change, there is hardly very little change in the objects of nature. And while human beings grow, become old, and ultimately die, so there is a huge change in the life of human beings, while the natural objects remain the same. So the poet tries to bring out the difference between the nature and human life, which through the contrast presenting a contrast between the feet of these girls. Here the poet wants also means to say that the feet terribly transient feet here also means that footprints of these girls were being which were created on the sand were also temporary. They were not, as you see that whenever we walk on the sand, then the wave comes and the footprints are washed away. So she also means to say that the sea was washing the feet, the imprints of the feet of these ladies, which were being washed away very very soon. So here we have literal meaning also, and the in you can say it is having a symbolic meaning also, because feet are referring to the human life, which are very very transient. And on the other hand, the terribly transient feet here being are washed away by the sea, as the footprints are washed away, or footprints on the sand are washed away by the sea very easily. Now, some 20-30 years later, she would laugh at that snapshot. The poetess says that 20-30 years later, after this photograph was clicked, and at the time her mother must be about in her 40s. So, after some time, when her mother grew up 20-30 years later, and at the time when this our poetess was also there, what does she see? The poetess sees that her mother was looking at the photograph and snapshot means photograph. She was also exclaiming crying with happiness. See Betty and Dolly, she would say. And looking at the photograph, she was saying, जरा देखना, जरा Betty and Dolly को देखो. Means she was quite surprised and was quite nostalgic about her past. She was very full of joy to see her snapshot, and says, see, look at the Betty and Dolly. They were her girl cousins, and look how they dressed up for the beach. और चला देखना how they are dressed up for the beach. Perhaps these girls are dressed up in a very awkward manner, and that's why she is looking at them and laughing, because they were not looking so smart, they were not so smartly dressed, and that's why, as their parents must have dressed them up, and so they must be looking very awkward. She says, look at these girls, how they are dressed up for the beach, for the beach holiday. The sea holiday was her past, mine is her laughter. And after that, the poet now remembers that the sea holiday was the past of her mother. The sea holiday that was spent by her mother was her mother's past, while my past is my mother's laughter. As her mother could not enjoy the sea holiday again, same way she could not enjoy and she could not experience her mother's laughter again, as her mother is also no more. Just like her mother at that moment could not enjoy the sea holiday, she is also unable to experience or see her mother laughing. Both rhyme with the labored ease of loss. Now these are the lines which are full of meaning. Both means both of them, the poet's mother and the poet, both of them are disappointed and dejected over their loss. The poetess is sad about the fact that her mother's laughter is a history. Her mother feels the same for her childhood days. The word "rai" here means disappointment. So both of them are disappointed. And what is the means of labored? Labored here conveys that both the poet and her mother, who were struggling and trying to cope up with their loss, both of them were trying to cope up with the loss, means both of them were trying to adjust with their loss, the loss of their beautiful past. Yet both of them realized that the loss was final and they had to accept it. therefore ease, that's why it is called ease. So labored ease of loss is also an oxymoron. I told you it's a poetic device, oxymoron, just like simile uh, and alliteration. All these poetic devices are there. Here we have oxymoron, oxymoron. It's a poetic device where two opposites are used together. You see, labored and ease both are put together. Both of them are quite antonyms. They are opposite to each other. Labored cannot be easy and ease cannot be labored. So here the poet has used oxymoron. Now she is dead nearly as many years as that girl lived. Now the poet says that now this girl who is in the photograph is her mother. She is dead nearly as many years as that girl lived. उतने ही साल हो गए हैं उसकी मदर को डेथ हुए जितनी उस गर्ल की एज थी. How old was that girl? And in the picture she was 12. And so as old as she was, as many years have passed, means 12 years, almost 12 years have passed since her mother has died. And of this circumstance here means of the death of his mother. Circumstance here refers to her mother's death. There is nothing to say at all. There is nothing to say at all means she has nothing to speak, as she is full of sorrow. She has nothing to say. She cannot express her feelings about her mother. There is nothing to say at all. Its silence silences. Its silence means the silence caused by the death of his mother has completely silenced her. It has completely made her silent. She has no word to speak, as she is full of sorrow for her mother, because she loved her mother very much. So this is the poem, a photograph. So many paragraphs are important. The first one which is important is my mother's, a sweet face, my mother's, that was before I was born, and the sea which appears to have changed less, washed their terribly transient feet. I will ask you some questions. Whose face is sweet? Whose sweet face is referred to here? The poet's mother's face is referred to here. What is the poetic device used in the first line of the stanza? Washed their terribly transient feet. Wash their terribly transient feet has two poetic devices. First of all, it has alliteration, terribly transient. T is repeated, and then here is another poetic device which is called transferred epithet. Here, what is transferred epithet? When a word does not represent the feet are called terribly transient. While feet are not terribly transient, actually the human life is transient. So when a word is referred to something else, it seems to have been transferred. Actually the poet wants to say the life of these girls who belonged, who had these feet, was transient. Here the poet has transferred this epithet feet to the feet, or transient to the feet only, and which is quite different, and that's why you can call it transferred epithet. So next is the endless. What has changed and what has not changed? What has changed? The sea has changed or not? No, the sea has not changed, while the human life of the girls have changed a lot, as the poet means to say that these girls who were so small at the time in the photograph grew old, and then grew up young, and then grew old, and then a time came when they died. So it's terribly the life of these girls was extremely transient, extremely temporary, while the sea, which refers to the natural objects, was uh, im- very permanent, as there was little change in the sea. Some 20-30 years later is also an important paragraph. She would laugh at the snapshot, see Betty and Dolly, and look how they dressed up for the beach. The sea holiday was her past, mine is her laughter. The poet's mother laughed at. What was the reason of her laughter? She was perhaps looking at the funny dress that these girls were wearing, Betty and Dolly were wearing for the beach holiday. And being grown up, the poetess mother lost the innocence and pleasure. She says that perhaps her mother had lost her innocence and pleasure of her childhood. जब हम बड़े हो जाते हैं तो हमारे चेहरे से जो इनोसेंस है वो चली जाती है, और यही वजह है कि पोएट अपने बचपन की फ़ोटोग्राफ देख करके थोड़ा सा नॉस्टैल्जिक हो रहा है. और दिस मदर ऑल्सो being grown up, the poetess mother also must have lost her childhood and her pleasures and innocence of childhood, which she is missing. Everybody wants to remain innocent and sweet like children, as we see that children are so innocent and so uh, gentle, and there are no kind of wickedness in their mind, so that we sometimes miss that childhood. And the same thing is happening with the mother, who is remembering her childhood days and feels that the innocence of her childhood was such a precious thing which she could store and preserve, but that is not possible. We grow up and our innocence is unknowingly lost. What was the past of the poetess mother enshrined in? What was the past of the poetess mother enshrined in? The past of her mother was enshrined in the photograph. It was preserved in the photograph. Now she has been dead nearly as many years as that girl lived, and of this circumstance there is nothing to say at all. Now you can see, now the last paragraph, the question is, the poet's mother breathed her last. How many years ago? 20 years ago, 24 years ago, 12 years ago, or a few days ago? The answer is 12 years ago, as the poet is saying that as that girl lived, that girl in the picture, the same time, the same amount of time has passed away since her mother has died. So about 12 years have passed since she has lost her mother. And the next question, the poet failed to give exact expression of to her deep what? To her deep pain. She has immense pain in her heart at the loss of her mother, and she has no way to express her pain. She is incapable of expressing her pain. There is nothing to say at all, and his silence silences. The silence caused by the death of her mother has created deep pain in her heart. The poetess is speechless because of her deep pain due to her mother's death. She is speechless, she has no words to say. So that's the end of this chapter. I hope you must have understood all the questions of it. Thank you.